Glenn Beck will join us to break down how the Democrats can dominate every step of the electoral process. Congressman Chip Roy sounds the alarm on the Biden administration's attempts to knock down the separation of powers. And Biden economic numbers, well, they might be skewed to help the Kamala Harris campaign. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. To the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Friday, November 1st. So does the left have a plan to dominate every step of the electoral process on Tuesday? I think I'm only smiling because it's a Friday. Glenn Beck detailed their 5-step plan to take over the election in a recent article on Blaze News, and he joins us now to discuss it, along with Blaze News editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson. So, Glenn, what could happen? I mean, they go through this, and they have the 5 different steps.
Yep.
Step 1 is winning the vote. How are they going to fortify this election?
So winning the vote, it's amazing because all of these are like, yeah, okay, well, we got to win the vote. But that begins on election day. This is, going in, making sure that you have absolutely everybody you can get out and vote. And if there's any legal things that have to happen before, you get Mark Elias on the phone and you position. This is why they're not, some people are like, oh, yeah, well, we're not asking for ID. Okay, well, that's all about winning the vote, finding the ways legally to either change the law or to just look the other way to win the vote. Then the next one is win the count. This is the one that everybody is concerned with, winning the count, because we saw it last time. All of a sudden, they just stopped counting at 10:30 at night. I remember watching Peter Jennings at, 4 o'clock in the morning in the 2000 election. He kept going. But this time we just stopped counting? When did that happen? That's where the shenanigans usually happen. Okay, now we have to win the count. We have to make sure that we start planting the seeds that we don't really know. We don't know who won or lost. This is a crucial step. Then the next one, and this is all of the things that the left said that Donald Trump did that was so wrong. Winning the certification. Each state has to certify the vote and seat the electors. Well, I know because I know Alan Dershowitz, who was on the Gore team, that they were told by their attorneys, you have to seat different electors. If you don't seat them, I think it's by like December 16th or December 20th. If you don't seat a different set or slate of electors, when you get to January 6th, you don't even have a case because you have to have that different slate. So winning the certification, they've got to win that and then set new electoral college electors in. After that, it's winning the transition, to do everything you can to make sure that the last worst case scenario is disrupt. They've already done a documentary on this. I talked about it on my show on Wednesday night on BlazeTV about wargaming, how they get through from election night to January 20th. And I think it's good that the government does wargaming. Unfortunately, these war games are being done by leftists. These are all being done. I mean, the most conservative is Bill Kristol, and he hates Donald Trump. Okay, that's the most conservative you have. And they wargamed what it's going to take to make sure that no shenanigans are going on. Well, I have a feeling, just like everything else, we disagree on what shenanigans are. We disagree on the truth. We were seeing it today with them claiming that Donald Trump is calling for the execution of Liz Cheney. That's not what he said, except that's not misinformation if it comes from them. That's not dangerous coming from them. That's the problem with all their war games. They're outlining everything that Donald Trump legally was stating he was going to do. They're now saying they can do it to save the republic. People don't know.
This is the thing that we try to talk about, so people are aware.
Be prepared.
This could happen. But backing up a little bit and just looking at the election itself, put their shenanigans aside.
Yeah.
You've seen a fair amount of elections. And
He's calling me old.
Yeah. Nice way, though.
Yeah, very nice way, yes.
Well, and you've been involved in the zeitgeist. You're right there, finger on the pulse. So when you look at this one, does it remind you of anything in the past?
Never. Yes and no. Yes and no. Never, because everything is so unusual. Okay. I mean, we have seen this guy in handcuffs. We've seen him at McDonald's in a garbage truck, getting up, saying fight after he's been shot with blood on his face. We've never seen anything like this election. However, it feels like every election that is when the country is off track. Right now, only 28% of America says we're on the right track. 28%. The magic number is 25 or 26%. No one's ever won an election as an incumbent at 26%. And even if it's not the incumbent, it's somebody from that party. They don't win. So that feels familiar. If you take out these plans from the left on setting the country on fire, if you take out those well-stated, well-thought-out plans, there's a good chance this is a landslide. Because I think what you have is those numbers. Even Nate Silver said today on 538, all of these polls, they're wrong. They're lying to you. He said, because nothing is that consistent. There's no outlier polls anywhere. Somebody has their thumb on the scale. And it's probably just from cowardice from these polling places. They don't want to be the one that said he's ahead by 12 points or she's ahead by 12 points. And if you look at what's happening with Trump on Joe Rogan, 100 million views. Kamala on Charlemagne the God or any other podcast, should be big, 700,000 views. There's no passion. And I think on the left, you can talk a good game, but people know this isn't working. This is not good. And she's not giving me confidence that she can even do the job. And I think that when you go into a voting booth, if you even get to the voting booth, you may not want to tell anyone you ever voted for Donald Trump. You might say, I voted for Kamala. I'm part of that team. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that don't, that say they are, but don't, and will never tell anybody.
Do you think so? If this is overwhelming, if there is a statement made by the American people, and it becomes clear, look, the polling, someone had their thumb on it, everything else like that, it strikes me that matters, because if they try all these shenanigans, right?
If it's a landslide, if we know on Tuesday night, which a landslide would do, if we know on Tuesday night, they can't pull any of this stuff. They can't. It'll be clear. And, I don't expect a Walter Mondale kind of landslide, but possibly a Barack Obama landslide. If that happens, it's clear the American people, this is the election I have wanted for so long. We are shown, if you care to look at it, socialism and the end of the American way of life, or a scrapping of all of the crap that's been going on, and being a conservative, saving the stuff that works, but cutting all of the waste, cutting all of the garbage, all the lies, all the cronyism. That's what RFK, Elon Musk are promising to do, along with Donald Trump. That's exciting. One of those visions is truly inspiring. And to me, it's Donald Trump's vision I've wanted for a long time. Give us choice. give us a choice. This is the clearest choice in my lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I love that it's so clear, right? Because if things are as bad as they are, I hope and pray that we don't have to figure out and see how much worse they would have to get before we get anything clearer than this election. But Glenn, I just want to know, how do you feel going into next week? Just with everything on the table, we know what's at stake. What are you feeling?
Two things. I'm feeling optimistic.
Whoa.
That means nothing, but I'm feeling optimistic and consistently optimistic. Only changed when I look at what they're doing behind the scenes. People are starting to freak out about all of they're finding cheating. They found these ballots. They found these ballots. That's good. Last time, we didn't hear that until after. That means we're doing our job. That means the states are finding corruption right now and stopping it. The other thing that I feel is no matter what happens, it's going to be for the good. God's not done with this country. He's not. I have thought for many years, we may be beyond saving because we're not humble. We're not. I don't think he's done with us. And that's all that matters. It'll be for our good no matter what happens.
Amen to that. I mean, the idea of providence needs to come back.
It does. It does. But it is. I mean, I was just with a group of people in Florida. There is a God movement that is beginning to happen, and people are waking up. That's why Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, these are all people that don't agree with each other or me or Donald Trump, but they're all saying we have to do something different. And just resetting back to factory settings of the Bill of Rights will do it.
One thing I'm going to hang on to after this is the idea of the death of the media regardless.
Oh.
Because it feels like to me,
Stunned.
either way, you are going to win in this election, having made a bet years ago on the direction of media and what was needed.
Yeah, I think the American people definitely win. This is the last television election. Definitely the last television election. The media has so discredited itself. There's no self-reflection. There's no, like, maybe it's us. None of that. They're going to double down on the people are stupid. And so when you see the kinds of numbers that Donald Trump can get 100 million with Joe Rogan, why would I do a debate on ABC and get 20 million? Why? It's over.
Glenn, we'll see you here on election night. And you know what? An optimistic Glenn Beck. That's what we're going to take into the weekend. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet.
Representative Chip Roy will tell us about the latest abuse from the federal government next. Halloween's behind us. Thanksgiving is up next. So what's better, turkey or ham? That's been the debate for so long in this country. But guess what? If you picked either one of them, you're wrong, because you're going to actually get a free ham. And we all know that free food tastes the best. It's a free ham from GoodRanchers.com. It's worth over $110. So when you look at its Thanksgiving special, you can choose any of their boxes. You can get 100% American meat or the wild-caught seafood, if that's how you like it, in a free 10-pound spiral-cut ham, and add it to your basket for free. So shop at GoodRanchers.com and support local farms and ranches. And you can skip the chaos of the grocery store. And most importantly, you can make time for the things that matter this year. It's all of the time with your family. That's what we want to be doing around the holidays anyway. So make time for the people that you love. So to claim your free Thanksgiving ham before they're gone, go to GoodRanchers.com and subscribe to any of their boxes. So be sure to order by November 19th for guaranteed delivery for Thanksgiving. Enjoy 100% American meat and that free 10-pound spiral cut ham. And all you have to do is go to GoodRanchers.com and use the word Jill at checkout. So go ahead and order the food that you trust and that matters most to you. Forget getting to the grocery store. Go to GoodRanchers.com and use the code Jill. Do this before the ham runs out. It's goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. Texas Representative Chip Roy recently called out what he described as an egregious abuse by the federal government, accusing it of trying to sidestep Congress to shape judicial policy. So he's here right now to talk about this. So, Congressman, let's get into this. How exactly is the government trying to overstep its bounds this time?
Well, what we have, a lot of people don't understand, is that with the federal judiciary, you have the administrative office of the courts, which technically reports up to a group of judges and ultimately the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And so they've got their different committees and their different procedures for doing things. Cutting to the chase, we got word from a lot of the judges that we know and what's going on actually on the ground that they didn't like the radical progressive left portion of the judiciary. They didn't like that you've got certain cases going to judges that we believe respect the Constitution in Texas, and that we've been getting some favorable rulings when we've got the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, in Texas bringing suit in a court, often because it's the court that's in that jurisdiction that makes sense. Like, for example, it might be Amarillo, Texas, or it might be another smaller town in Texas. And keep in mind that the left has for years been packing the judiciary with their radical progressive left in certain jurisdictions where they're able to then go jam through and get decisions that they like from a bunch of radical liberal judges. And so you see that in the Ninth Circuit, for example, or you see it in certain cities, even in something like the Fifth Circuit in Texas. Here you've got conservative judges issuing good opinions, issuing good orders, and now you've got this cabal within the administrative office of the courts trying to change the rule from the statutorily required district court making the decision to something that would be random assignment. Now, you've got a bunch of the bureaucrats over there that are mad at my letter saying, oh, we weren't doing this. But everybody I've talked to that's familiar with it says, no, they were trying to do that. And that would end run all of the great successful efforts by, again, the Attorney General of Texas going to these judges and getting favorable rulings against really bad policies that the people of Texas want to see stopped.
Congressman, I know you're also questioning the DOJ over, they're called civil rights groups, but I use that term loosely, who are working with the government to go after states like Virginia and Alabama who want to remove non-citizens from voter rolls. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Let me just close out on that first point, just so people understand. What I've suggested is that we shouldn't, in the House of Representatives, just take the rubber stamp of a piece of legislation that the courts want us to pass that would expand the number of judges and do things they want, unless they will commit to us that they're not going to use the bureaucracy within the judiciary to undermine our statutes. So, in other words, work with us and we'll work with you. And they didn't like that. And I'm going to be working with the House Judiciary Committee to try to push back on the judiciary overstepping its bounds. To this last point, yeah, the Department of Justice, we're concerned that they are working with these radical leftist organizations that have been active in bringing suit in both Alabama and Virginia, as you know. Now, thankfully, the Supreme Court ruled this past week, as the listeners no doubt know, that the district court in Virginia had erred and had made a bad order when that district court tried to step in and tell Virginia it couldn't clean off its voter rolls of 1,500 non-citizens. The Supreme Court stayed that decision, which was great. That was a victory for the Attorney General Mayoras and by Governor Youngkin in Virginia. I will note that Governor Youngkin appropriately pointed out that we should pass the SAVE Act, the bill that I introduced this spring that we passed out of the House in July, but that Chuck Schumer is blocking. It would require documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. But it's important that in this letter, we highlight the extent to which it's very obvious that the organizations involved that were filing suit in Alabama and Virginia, those are clearly connected and related to what the DOJ is doing in working directly with them. So we want to know what the communication was between those groups, because the timing is all suspect. And we want to understand exactly who's calling the shots and making the decisions. We don't have a president who's present. We've got an aggressive attorney general, an aggressive secretary of Homeland Security. I want to know who's calling the shots. So we're pushing on DOJ to answer those questions so we can understand how much these radical progressive leftist groups are actually calling the shots.
I want to go ahead and look to next week with you because, of course, we know all the House members are always up for re-election every single time. So what's at stake in the House, particularly this time around?
Yeah, well, first of all, it will do us no good to elect Donald Trump to the White House if we've got a House of Representatives that is controlled by Hakeem Jeffries and our radical progressive Democrat friends who will immediately set out to not even seat the president, right? That would be step one. Jamie Raskin has already said that he doesn't believe that they should accept the electors for Donald Trump. And then secondly, they would immediately work to impeach him. And then thirdly, obviously, they would work to defund and stop any ability for President Trump to be able to move forward. So you need a Republican House, but not just a Republican House, but a Republican House that will avoid the failures of 2017. Remember that when we had the Paul Ryan House of Representatives in 2017, Republicans dropped the ball on both Obamacare and healthcare reform, and they dropped the ball on the border. And that was a massive failure. And it led to a disaster election in 2018. And it led to then the president facing impeachment by radical Democrats. So let's avoid that here. Let's do our job next Tuesday. I believe if President Trump wins and is able to sweep the Sun Belt and do well in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, I believe that will carry the House through. And I think we'll get close to a 10-seat majority. I hope. There's a lot of really close races in the margin, and we got to show up to get it done. And I hope we'll get 52 or 3 or 4 senators. There's some close races out there. But, you know, when we had last Friday, our friend Steve Bannon, you know, got released from jail. And he said, and I think he was correct, that the only thing standing between us and success on Tuesday is the couch. If we do our part, if every church-going Republican, if every gun-owning Republican shows up between now and Tuesday, we will have a very successful day. But if people stay home and they allow their friends and their loved ones and their church, mates to stay home, then we'll have a failure next Tuesday.
Congressman, I want to go back to what we started with, which is this matter of the judiciary. I mean, that's a great example of how important the House is and how important it is to have people who understand how this works. And, you know, I would bet that for a lot of people in the audience, the idea that legislation controls, right, much of how the courts operate is just not something that comes up very frequently. But it strikes me as an example of just how important these elections are. Could you say a little bit more about what the stakes would be and what things would look like if they're allowed to get away with this?
Well, sure. I mean, that example is a really good one. Obviously, all of the oversight function, I already talked about the issues with respect to impeachment and seating the president. But let's also think about one of the first things that's going to come up in January. We're going to have to deal with the debt ceiling. We're going to have to deal with the government funding. We're going to have to deal with what we call reconciliation, which is the opportunity, if we have the House and the Senate, to do what we need to do to make sure our tax policy is proper so that we're not increasing taxes on the American people, to make sure that we're constraining spending, but also to get really important policy changes. Like, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has the massive subsidies for all the solar panels and wind that are undermining American energy and undermining American energy freedom, driving up the cost of all goods and services, but particularly energy. Those kinds of things are all things that we must have the House majority for. But the things you're talking about are the things that people don't even really think through. The oversight function, checks and balances, and making sure that we're doing what we need to do. And if we have President Trump in the executive branch and you have a House that's controlled by Democrats, then you're going to get nothing but stonewalling and obstruction to what President Trump's going to need to do to undo the damage of the Biden, Harris, Mayorkas, Garland et al. Regime that has been destroying freedom in our country, that has been allowing big tech to squelch free speech, that has been targeting American citizens with the FACE Act and putting Americans in jail for simply exercising their constitutional rights, that has been undermining our security at the border, that led to the death of Laken Riley in Georgia, that led to the death of Rachel Marin and Kayla Hamilton in Maryland, that led to the death of Jocelyn Nungray in Houston, Texas, because violent gangs have been released on our streets. I could go on and on about the border, but these are all of the things that are hanging in the balance based on what we do on Tuesday. We need the president in the White House. We need a strong conservative House that will fight, not just a Republican House, a conservative House that will fight. And we need the Senate and we need to stand up and actually do what we said we would do once given the ability to do so by the people.
Like Chip said, like Steve Bannon said, do not just sit on the couch. Get out and go vote on Tuesday. Congressman Chip Roy, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, y'all. God bless you.
When we come back, we'll determine the difference between the economic truth and statistics. Coming up. You just heard what's at stake there from Congressman Chip Roy. We know that this is the biggest election of our lifetime, and we know that everyone needs to get out and go vote. And then on election night, you're going to want to be a member of BlazeTV so you can join me, Matthew Peterson, Glenn Beck, Steve Deace, Liz Wheeler, all of your favorite hosts from BlazeTV, because we know right now that we're at a crossroads and the future of our nation is going to be decided in real time. And BlazeTV will have boots on the ground all across the country, and our correspondents will be in the middle of the action right where it's happening. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can experience this pivotal night with us. And at BlazeTV, we're going to speak the truth. There's not going to be any filters, no spin. We're just going to have real talk, breaking down what's happening in real time. And we'd love to have you with us. So go to blazeelection.com/BNT and get $40 off. It's blazeelection.com/BNT for $40 off. There's a disconnect between the quote-unquote strong economic numbers and public sentiment. There are many voters out there that still feel unsure about the economy. And can we really trust the numbers that we're seeing? We got a jobs report out today that showed that the U.S. added 12,000 jobs over the last month, but that was well below the 100,000 expected. Dowd is the founder of Phinance Technologies and author of Cause Unknown, the epidemic of sudden death in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And he joins us now. So, Ed, we know these numbers are going to likely get revised down. So what's the real picture here?
The real picture is I've seen surveys that indicate job growth this year has been zero, as opposed to the numbers of millions of jobs added. And in fact, if you look at the payroll numbers, there was a big in August revised down 850,000 jobs. This number just came out. And it had if you take out the government jobs, we actually missed the payroll number and went negative. So they've definitely been painting cooking the books on the payroll number. The real economy is, you talk to anybody on the street, it's not good. In fact, I saw a study that showed weekly real average wage growth year over year. And in 1980, it hit -2%, and Reagan won in a landslide. Same thing happened in 1990 with Bill Clinton. Real wages were -2%, and we are at -2% right now. So the real economy, the real average person feels like we're in a recession. We probably are in a recession. The GDP number that we had of 3% was all government spending, government job growth. And I think over time, the truth will come out. Unfortunately, should President Trump win, he's going to inherit one economic turd of an outcome, and it's going to be very interesting how the media spins that on his watch. But it's definitely been set up by the books being cooked, in our opinion. I mean, we're seeing our economic indicators peaked out in April. They've been going down every month. So what we're seeing is a tale of two cities. The financial markets haven't figured this out yet, but the man on the street has. And if the -2% weekly average real wage growth is any indication, Trump has already won. The question is, are they going to let him, and are they going to try to sell the steal?
So, Ed, let's go back to that. I mean, you were saying this on Twitter as well. I mean, they're going to the books are cooked. They're going to blame him, right? And how do you think that plays out?
Well, so right now, the stock market has been floated on, there's always been conspiracy theories that the market's been manipulated by the Fed. Every trader and Wall Street expert I've talked to is kind of seen things they've never seen in the market. So we have a very narrow market. The average stock has not gotten back to its 22 highs. We have like 3 or 4 big stocks like NVIDIA and others that are making the averages look like everything's fine. I suspect the interest rate cuts that we saw, 50 basis points, are going to accelerate once Trump gets in, and it becomes apparent that we have an economic disaster on our hands, and that's going to manifest fairly quickly. And if not in the next couple of weeks, the markets are presenting very fragile structure, and I know some very smart people who are looking at a big short here at this time.
So knowing that there's an economic disaster looming, as you say, then what policies should Trump try and come in with this next administration should he win?
Well, unfortunately, whoever inherits this has a deficit problem. We're currently running a $2 trillion annual deficit. And the truth of the matter is most of the economy, the real economy, is already in recession, and the government is the only game in town. So, Elon Musk, if he is tasked to cutting the government, it will cause austerity, it will cause economic pain, but it has to be transparent, and it's a good thing long term because the capital that's being put into the economy is wasteful. And if we can cut the government spending, get a recession out of the way, then we can build in the private economy again and reinvest in the U.S. Trump has a plan to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. It'll take time. It won't be an easy fix. But there needs to be, kind of these fireside chats he's going to have to do to talk to the country about what we need to do to tighten the belt. And it's not going to be fun and it's going to be painful, but it's already baked into the cake.
I want to hear more about that in the 60 seconds we have left. So if you're advising Trump, and it sounds like you forecast he's likely to win, what do you have him come out and say?
Well, I would have a fireside chat and say we have to tighten our belts, and unfortunately, it's going to be some economic pain. We'll try to have some programs to help people get by, but this is no easy fix. And when I was on the Kennedy campaign, I was advising austerity would have to be part of the messaging, and I think austerity is what's coming in a lot of our economy at the moment. So. He has to be honest with the people. He has to be transparent about what happened in the prior administration and talk about what wasn't his fault and what will be his fault intentionally, but that it has to be done.
Well, I hope that we are all correct in what we're forecasting in a Trump victory on Tuesday, and I can't wait to break down everything on the other side with you, Ed. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
When we come back, we'll explain why a Trump victory will be contested. Stay tuned. On Steve Bannon's War Room, Darren Beattie, the founder and editor of Revolver News, explained that Representative Jamie Raskin has a plan to oppose the Trump victory no matter what.
His theory, which he has advanced publicly, is that Trump is constitutionally ineligible to be president on the basis of his sham interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. In fact, the extended version of this clip in circulation, he's criticizing the Supreme Court for not being proactive enough in effecting revolutionary change. And he thinks they really dropped the ball because they haven't gone along with this sham theory that Trump is ineligible on the basis of this alleged incitement of what we all now know is a Fedsurrection and not an insurrection.
Darren joins us now to discuss. So let's break down this strategy for us, will you?
Absolutely. It's great to be with you. And yes, we need to turn our attention to this. Obviously, our primary focus is getting the win in because a steal presupposes a win to begin with. So first things first, we all need to get out there and actually, do the vote that I think the country needs. But this is a very disturbing plan, and it harkens back to a larger network and a larger approach and a kind of thematic reorientation of much of our national security apparatus. Over 4 years ago, Revolver News, my news organization, myself, sort of shaped the national conversation by popularizing this concept called color revolution. And we noted through a series of reports that many of the very same color revolution architects, that is, people who employ a specific regime change methodology that relies more on mass mobilization, leveraging media, leveraging NGOs, lawfare, election challenging, things like this, rather than boots on the ground Iraq war style. The color revolution style is preferred by this faction called the Atlanticists, who are particularly obsessed with Russia and Eastern European countries. And people paying attention notice, why are there so many Ukraine specialists and people with specialization in Eastern Europe who were prominently and disproportionately represented in the impeachments against Trump and so forth? One of the key reasons for this is that many of the same people who specialized in undermining leaders they didn't like overseas were using the same tactics, deploying the same tactics, using the same tools domestically to undermine Trump. And so that was a very big deal in 2016 and 2020. And what Raskin is entertaining and suggesting is sort of in that vein, which is to say, call for a mass mobilization. He said, prepare for a civil war like footing if indeed Trump wins the electoral vote. And of course, don't certify it. Why not certify it? Because in his deranged mind, Trump is constitutionally ineligible on the basis of this sham theory that he incited an insurrection and is therefore disqualified on the basis of the 14th Amendment. Total kook stuff, but this guy is a sitting congressman. And this is his publicly stated plan, saying we don't need to certify the results, which just the insult added to the injury here is that this is the same January 6th obsessive who's saying that, oh, the MAGA people, the Trump people, they tried to overturn the election January 6th. This is the guy who's actually promoting this very idea that he's falsely accused Trump and his supporters of propounding in 2020.
Darren, one thing an objection would be, as you yourself said, look, Raskin is he's an ideologue, he's a radical, he's a lunatic. And the question would be, do they have enough special sauce to pull something like this off or to make this credible? In other words, as you rightly pointed out and pointed everyone to, the idea of the color revolution, which we run in other countries, being run here, do they have enough juice to do that this time around? What do you think of the factors of whether something like this succeeds or fails?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is no. I don't think they have enough juice for this. I think if you compare sort of the milieu, the environment, the political and cultural environment, Trump is actually far more normalized now than he was in 2020. You have kooks like Raskin still, reading the same script, and he's deranged and neurotic enough to believe it. But there isn't that regime-wide consensus that Trump is an existential threat that you saw even in 2020, not to mention 2016. And so for that reason, you always want to pay attention when a congressman says, here's what we're going to do. And it would be nice if other elected officials condemned that and pointed out that it's deranged and said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to have a fair election, something that we want to keep an eye on, as I'm doing. But I just don't think that there's that broad-based regime consensus that would, and there's more of a normalization effect, which I think would make it very hard to sustain the mass mobilization that's often critical to this color revolution tactic.
Well, if there is a contested election, we have to remember Kamala Harris right now, president of the Senate. There was an American Mind article from 2022 that said this year Kamala Harris might do what Mike Pence didn't do back in 2020, using her role as the president of the Senate to refuse to count the suspect vote. So is this a real possibility of things? If we're throwing things out there, how real is this one?
Well, it's certainly a real possibility. That's why we're paying attention. Do I think it's likely? Do I think this is a pressing matter? Maybe, maybe not. And it depends how the election pans out. If it's so close that it's ambiguous and it's hotly contested, that might encourage these kinds of, extreme measures undertaken, because then they could claim some mantle of legitimacy in the murkiness of sort of an ambiguous result. So the election result matters, how decisive it is, what the margin it is, how much it's contested. All of those things matter. Still, I think if I'm putting myself in the position of the regime, I think the incentive is much more to quote unquote cheat, or put all of their energy in focusing on getting that electoral win first, so they don't have to resort to something that I think would appear to the public to be extreme and deranged at this juncture, of something like Kamala refuses to certify. She's not particularly popular. Again, you need a regime consensus behind you, which she doesn't have. The atmosphere is very different from 2020 and 2016. So I think the incentives are such that they're really going to put their energy into doing whatever shenanigans they have in place. They're going to do it in the coming days leading up to and on the election. Shenanigans in Pennsylvania, that sort of thing. I think if I were them, that's where they're more likely to effect a decisive result that could ultimately be palatable to the population, rather than a kind of interim after the fact overturning of the sort that Raskin and others have propounded. But of course, you can never count these people out. They are very deranged, and they're known to act upon that derangement, especially when they feel most threatened.
Yeah, Darren, I think I feel similarly. I mean, it's an odd position to be in, because on the one hand, if I just analyze, and I'm curious, if you think the same, if I analyze what's going on, you certainly feel almost a kind of break, a surge, right? A cultural change, a vibe shift, whatever you want to call it, right? You said Trump is more normalized now than he was then. That's true. You have Elon, right? All this stuff is happening. We all know it. We see it. We feel it. On the other hand, just based on reason and based on reason, right? Rational thought about what's happened in the last 9 years, and looking at what these people say every day. I mean, we had Glenn Beck on earlier talking about the war game stuff that's coming out, as always does during this time, and what they've gained out. We know what everyone's thinking. We know they have the resources and the lawyers, and so we're in this odd situation where what you're saying is, look, if there's a big enough win, it doesn't matter. They won't be able to pull it off. Is that oversimplifying?
We have about 60 seconds, Darren.
I think the bigger the win, the harder it is to do, the greater the ambiguity, the more they might determine, okay, now we can get away with this and claim some mantle of legitimacy if we refuse to certify, or if we even overturn a certification. So the level of contentiousness as to the immediate result itself, I think, will affect the perceived optionality of what the regime can do and get away with and would be willing to do in the aftermath.
It's going to be an interesting week, no doubt. Darren, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And Matthew, I mean, there are so many different results to go through that we could spend hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, and we frankly, we don't know. And I think it's just important to think through these scenarios, as Darren has been doing for years. And, we got to give a shout out to him. I mean, he started Revolver News, and they've done a lot of amazing stuff, and they deserve some credit for that as a small independent shop. But the important thing is, as he said, if you win big, it makes all this stuff a lot harder, right? And the other important thing is realizing they're going to try this stuff regardless. And so it starts with the shenanigans, as he says, on election day. They delay that vote coming back, right? And then you go into this constitutional stuff that can also play into it if they feel like, especially, that it's contested already, right? So the way that would play out is they say, look, you guys cheated in a certain state, right? And this is a problem. We don't know who's going to win. And therefore, we got to go back and forth. And we take it up to a higher level, and she shouldn't certify. No, and they'll make that argument with a straight face, boldly, with constitutional scholars. I mean, they'll have no problem doing it.
They will have no problem doing it, and we'll be breaking it all down. Don't worry, we'll come right back, though, with some final thoughts after this. I feel like we can start counting down to the election in hours now instead of days. We're getting so close. But what Representative Chip Roy said that Steve Bannon said is, get off the couch. and go vote, Matthew Peterson. It's going to be the most important message that we could say this entire show.
Yeah, I mean, none of this matters. You have to think to yourself, if you care about politics, and you probably do if you're watching this show, you care about news. If you're, at that book club, you're in that chat group and you're complaining and talking about politics, none of that matters unless you get off the couch and you get other people to get off the couch and go vote before Tuesday's over.
Because as Glenn Beck was saying on the show earlier today, the Democrats, they have an entire war game planned out, and it gets a lot harder for them to execute that if the Republicans win big on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, too big to rig is a simplifying phrase, but I think it kind of makes sense, and that's the only way to fly right now. And furthermore, we don't know. We don't know. No one trusts the polling, right, completely. So it's very difficult to actually determine where we're even at. What we do know is going out and voting will take care of it, although there's going to be a lot of shenanigans and, war games indeed.
Usually on a Friday, we lighten things up, I feel like, except today we have the war games and we have a little color revolution talk as well.
Yes.
We're getting closer to the big momentous things that are happening when that's how we close out a week.
Yeah, and I've been predicting, look, if Trump wins, they're going to just color revolution all over the place. Like, there'll be protests in the streets. They'll try to say the regime isn't legitimate. He didn't actually win, things that we've done in other countries for decades. I think this time, there's reason to be alarmed because, just think about this year. They put out a movie called Civil War.
They did,
at the
back in
very
April.
end of which, clearly someone who is from the military, one of the militaries fighting each other in the United States in a civil war, shoots, summarily executes the president of the United States, who clearly is geared to look like Trump. They have something called War Game right now, a documentary where they go around the country and then they poll people as to whether the president should invoke the Insurrection Act and basically bring down the hammer on people disputing election results. So they talk about this stuff a lot. The way to bypass it all is to win, baby. Just win.
Just a little predictive programming there from Hollywood that we see. But I always love when we have Ed Dowd on the show, and he's saying basically we're probably in a recession right now. All of the economic crap is already baked into the cake, he said. So if we needed another reason for Donald Trump to go out there and win on Tuesday, it's so that somebody sane with economic policies can steer us through what is about to be coming down at us.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how he's saying, very intelligently, the next president should say, look, this is not going to be easy. We're in a bad way, and speak honestly to the people and then provide a path and a route. We're going to get out of this, but it may get worse before it gets better because of the situation we put ourselves in. That would be so refreshing, right? To hear that kind of honesty from a leader.
You mean treat adults like they're adults and go out there and figure out, oh, these things are going to happen anyway. Let's just address the situation head on. Is that even possible at this stage of the game?
It'd be very nice. Instead of Kamala's cackling, it'd be great. Instead of cackles, we had honest talk. But, that's what this election's all about.
That is. And you know what? Go ahead and take the weekend. Enjoy it. We don't know what's coming at us next week. It could be a long and bumpy ride. We hope it's not. We hope it's too big to rig. But everybody, enjoy your weekend. We're going to be back to break it all down on Monday.